Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing. Really appreciate you guys checking today's video out and spending some time with me. We are going to be talking about why most anglers struggle to catch big bass and how most anglers do not consistently catch big ones, and how if you catch a big one it's just real random, and basically some things that you can do to put catching those bigger fish on a more consistent level, put those odds in your favor a little bit. We're going to get into that in today's video. Also, guys, I just wanted to extend a big thank you to everybody that's taken time to support Advanced Bass Fishing here in 2024. Really appreciate all the efforts you guys have done subscribing to the channel and using the links I put in the description of each video. And if you're interested in doing one thing to give back to Advanced Bass Fishing, if you get a lot out of the channel here, just use and bookmark that Tackle Warehouse link that I put in the description of every video. You know, anytime you need to buy some tackle, if you guys would just use that link all the time, that's the best way to support the channel. And we get a small commission, a small percentage of the commission on anything you buy. So if you buy a bag of worms for $5, you get a few cents out of it. So it's a good way to help the channel out. Really appreciate that, guys. Okay, there's a lot to this. I want to get into it as far as consistently catching big ones. One of the things I learned a lot about this is back when I was fishing Bassmaster Top 100s and Top 150s like 30 years ago. There was a period of, I think that was like a 3 or 4 year period where I won big bass of the tournament 7 different times over a course of about a 3 year period. Either the daily big bass or the big bass of the tournament, either one. So I sort of got a feel for what it takes to consistently catch big ones. So I wanted to share that with you guys today so you can increase your odds of consistently catching bigger fish, because that's the fun thing about fishing, is catching big ones is fun, man. It really is. So we're going to get into that a little bit here. So first of all, this is wide ranging here. Number one is, like above anything else, you've got to be in a lake that has big fish in it. If you fish a lake that doesn't have very many big fish in it, you're not going to catch very many big fish. And we've talked a little bit about this before, but all the anglers out there that are from California, Texas, and Florida are spoiled. If you live in one of those 3 states, consider yourself very lucky, because you guys live where the big fish live. It's not like that everywhere else. Everywhere else, it's a struggle to catch big ones. But those 3 states account for the vast majority of bass over 7 pounds caught every year. Vast majority. Here in Missouri, it didn't used to be like that. It used to be a 7 or 8 pound bass was fairly common, but not anymore. Anymore here in my state of Missouri, even though we have good fisheries here, a 7 pound bass is a rarity. I mean, it is extremely rare to catch a 7 pound bass. A 7 pound bass happens probably in tournament competition throughout the course of the year of the tournaments I fish in. I bet fewer than 20% of the tournaments I fish all year long have big bass of the tournament weighing 7 pounds or more. Most of them are down in that 5 pound range for what you find. So that's the first thing. You got to be around the big ones before you can catch them. But a big one is relative to your lake. So you can still, if you fish Table Rock Lake in Missouri, you can still use these techniques I'm talking about to catch more 5 pound fish. Okay, the next thing you do, there's a combination of your technique and the area that you're fishing. Before we get into the techniques that catch big ones, the first thing is you have to be where the big ones live within your lake. And big fish just don't live anywhere. I mean, if you catch a big fish and you don't catch very many of them, yeah, you might randomly catch a big one here and there based upon different times of the year. But most of the time, if you're going to consistently, and I mean consistently, catch big fish, the area that you're fishing has to sort of fall in a few different categories. Number one is, most of the time, unless you're fishing, the whole live scope deal, I'm not even talking about that. When you're talking about targeting fish suspended out in the middle of nowhere, that's not bass fishing, so I'm not talking about that. But most of the time, when you're targeting big ones, you have got to fish around an area that has some type of either a diversity of cover or some thick cover. You know, big fish do not like just to be out on nothing, again, unless they're just roaming out in the middle of 100 foot of water. That's a little bit different deal. But most big fish like to be in and around some type of cover, whether it be grass beds, lily pads, brush piles, docks, anything like that. So the first criteria is you have to fish around pretty much about some of the heaviest cover that you have within your lake. Now, some lakes have heavier cover than others, but try to find those areas that have, pretty heavy cover for the lake that you're fishing. Not necessarily that you have to fish in that heavy cover, but in and around that heavy cover. Second with that is you have to have an area that has some type of a proximity to deep water or some type of a highway system through there. And what I'm talking about a highway system is bass use geographical features on a lake's bottom to navigate and move, unless they're suspended and roaming chasing shad schools. So a lot of those highways that the fish use are like channel banks and points and ditches. These are really good places to catch big fish. It's channel banks that have deep water access next to them, some type of a ditch that offers deep water access and some cover, and then some type of a proximity to deep water within all of those. Once you have that highway system and the proximity to deep water in correlation with some heavy cover nearby, then you have all the elements needed for big fish to feel comfortable at. So let me give you a prime example what this would be. A prime example would be, say for example, you're on a lake that has some boat docks on it, and you've got this row of boat docks that's on the bank. Now, there might be one boat dock on that row that is like close to a main lake point, and maybe the water underneath that boat dock is a little bit deeper, and maybe the person that owns that dock hung out a bunch of Christmas trees there to attract crappie. So if you've got a bank that's got 20 or 30 docks on it, there might be one dock that is attractive to big fish because it has every ingredient that I listed there, or your odds of catching a big one are going to be a little bit better there. So you can equate that to anything. It can be a grass bed next to a drop off. It can be a lily pad field close to a creek channel. It could be a lay down tree, adjacent to some deep water. I mean, just a lot of different things, but having that access to deep water and cover is critical. Okay, now once you're on the lake that you think there's some good fish on, and you figure out where you think you need to be fishing based upon the time of year to catch big ones, that's another thing we didn't talk about, is these fish will be in different places at different times of the year. But the technique is also going to be, important as far as using the right technique to catch those big ones, because if you don't fish for big ones with the baits that produce big ones, again, you're randomly just going to catch a big one. I mean, the biggest bass that has ever gotten put in my boat over about the past 5 years was a friend of mine caught one close to 8 pounds on a little Ned rig, like a little that he had bit down. The Ned rig was about that big, but that was just a freak. I mean, that's not something you happen all the time. But if you're going to consistently catch big ones and not just one like I just talked about with the Ned rig once in a while, you got to fish those lure categories that produce bigger fish, which are bigger lures. Now, the most famous big bass lures anymore are glide baits and swim baits. I don't recommend them, guys. If you want to consistently catch big fish, I do not recommend glide baits and swim baits. Glide baits and swim baits are very, very low percentage lures. It's like you can throw them all day long and not get a bite on them, or you can throw them all day long and you might get a couple big fish that come up and look at them and not bite them. Glide baits, in my opinion, are fun to fish, but they're worthless to fish for the most part. And I'm not saying you can't occasionally catch one on them, but for the amount of time that you use a glide bait or a big swim bait and the amount of big fish that you catch on them, it's not worth your time. Now, here's the lures that will catch you bigger ones consistently than any other lure. The number one big fish lure that will consistently catch big ones more than anything else, it's pretty close, there's two of them, but in my opinion, the number one is a big spinnerbait. A big 3/4 to 1 ounce spinnerbait with a big number 6, number 7, number 8 blade on it. Tandem spin with a big trailer on it. A big profile, big spinnerbait. That, in my opinion, is the number one most consistent big bass producing lure that you can fish. I've probably caught more big ones, excuse me guys, I'm getting over the sinus infection I got. I probably caught more big ones on that big spinnerbait setup than any other time, specifically in the pre-spawn time of the year. And that is the best time of year to catch a big fish, is in the pre-spawn. Now, a close second to the big spinnerbait is a full-size jig, like a half-ounce jig with a full-size skirt on it, a big trailer, a big, bulky, large profile pitching and flipping jig that is 4.5, 5 inches long, something like that. That is a excellent big bass lure. Those are by far, I've probably caught, I'm going to say 80% of the really big bass I've caught in my life have come on those two lures. And how I use them is based upon just the cover I'm fishing or what the fish want. You know, if they're on the bottom, I catch a lot of fish on a jig. If they're in the mid-water column where I'm slow rolling that spinnerbait where the fish are coming up on it, you know, I'll catch them on a spinnerbait. But those are going to be the two biggest big fish producers that you're going to have. The next one behind that is a big deep diving crankbait. Big deep diving crankbait like a Norman DD22, a Megabass Deep 6, a Strike King 6 or 8XD. Those are great big fish lures, especially in the summertime of the year, late spring, early summer, really, really good baits. And the fourth one would be some type of a big topwater, like a big super spook, a big buzz bait, you know, a wake bait, some type of a large topwater is another way to catch a really big fish. So all the big ones I've caught, guys, consistently have come on those four baits: big spinnerbait, jig, you know, the deep diving crankbait, and the topwater. You know, if you want to catch big ones, if you concentrate on those four baits in that type of areas that I'm talking about, your odds of catching big ones are going to go way up. So hope it helps out, guys. We'll talk later.